So how does a nation hide from its shame? Well, there are two ways that people usually hide from shame. They try to put it on others. And so when they start to feel shame, they then look for someone to put it on, to get it outside themselves and project it on somebody else. And so most of what you see in the news today are people projecting their shame on each other. It's called the false equivalency game. That's all coming out of shame. So what is shame? Well, shame means you believe there is something wrong with you, and that something that's wrong with you is something you can't correct, and so you're kind of stuck with it. And so people don't know how to process that, and when they feel shame, uh, they want to get rid of that feeling as quickly as possible, and so the other way that people in this country hide their shame is through pride. Pride always covers shame. So you find somebody who is acting in a very prideful way, you probably have somebody who's dealing with a lot of shame. And uh, well, we've had a lot of political leaders who've certainly demonstrated that. So it's really a kind of a crazy thing to look at. And when I work with my clients, I see the shame. In fact, if anyone comes to me and they've been in therapy before, I know that they're dealing with shame. Because what therapy does, traditional therapy today, the therapy model we have is that when you go to a therapist and you check in and you get to see the person, the first job that that therapist has is to diagnose you, to put a name on your shame. You show up because you think there's something wrong with you, and now you have a name for it. It can be depression or major depression, or it can be bipolar, or it can be, you know, borderline personality disorder, whatever it might be. You now have a name for your shame, and it's almost like putting a stamp on your forehead. And so when I see a client who's been, and particularly someone who's been in therapy in a traditional model, the first thing I say to them, I look at them right in the eye and I say, listen, there's nothing wrong with you. There's absolutely nothing wrong with you. That I'm not here to fix you, and we're here to do other things than try to find out what's wrong with you and fix you. Then I proceed to tell them what I'm going to be doing with them, which is helping them understand themselves better, develop a higher level of psychological intelligence so that they understand why they do what they do, and then also help them make better decisions as a result. And so I deal with that. I call it the breaking through the shame barrier with clients. And there are some clients who said to me, that's the most important thing you ever said to me. No one ever said that to me. I've grown up and I thought my whole life there was something wrong with me. And now you tell me there's nothing wrong with me. That takes a whole kind of level of stress out of people's. I mean, you can see it in their face when I say that to them. They immediately relax, and they immediately then are more open to looking at what is going on, and how can they learn to better understand what's going on in their life. So that's what I do with shame. And we have a lot of things in this country we should be ashamed of. Of course, our wars are some of them, but the way we treat women, the way we have treated minorities, the way we've treated our native brothers and sisters. I mean, there's just a lot of things that we have should feel some shame about, but we never do. I mean, even in some of the I look at South Africa when they had the switch away from apartheid to more democratic rule. They created a reconciliation commission to reconciliate the shame and heal the shame that a lot of the white rulers of South Africa were carrying around. And so it's really uh, not a new thing, but we haven't ever had a reconciliation commission in this country that I know of. Maybe a few small ones where we realized that we didn't keep treaties with our native folks, and then we had to have had some litigation that ended up being restoring the original treaties. Canada has done some of this. They have reconciliation commissions. They've done some reconciliation with native populations in Canada that U.S. hasn't begun to think about yet. So shame is a big issue in this country, and I mean, the if we didn't carry around this shame and we were psychologically intelligent, we would look at what these other countries are saying is and saying, well, teach us how to do that. That looks pretty good. That looks like that works really well for you. Teach us how to do that so we can make it work in our culture. But instead, we develop these kind of camps of just denigrating differences in people and differences in the way other people do it, instead of seeing that every culture works fine, and they have some of the things in their culture that would be useful for me and my culture if I understood how to make them work in my culture like they work in their culture. So I do think that we carry around this shame, and when I work with that in with my clients, put up the list of shame-based beliefs. This is something I've developed to help me work with my clients, and it's a list of 30 the most common shame-based beliefs we have in this country. And it's too small for me to read without my glasses on. But uh, so the first one is I have to be perfect in order to be loved by others. A very common shame-based belief that somehow, if I'm not perfect, there's something wrong with me, and that's often learned growing up in families where the family is trying to provide an image of being the perfect family. There's no such thing as a perfect family. There never will be. Families are kind of the last vestige of amateurism in our culture. I mean, nobody's trained to ever be a parent unless they go to a class by themselves. But there's no way to. You don't have to. You have to go through training in almost every other area of our lives to do what we do. We have to train to learn how to drive a car before we get a license. Many other areas of our life, we have to have training in order to perform the job. But as far as the job of parenting, there's no training that is required at this point. And so I take any of these beliefs and I talk about people about, well, what isn't working in your life? Well, I'm socially anxious. When I get in social situations, I clam up. I can't seem to think very well on my feet. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. Well, that I trace that back to some kind of thing that might be related to a belief they have, or some kind of incidents in their lives that cause them to form a belief. What I've come to understand isn't what we've experienced in life. It's what we come to believe about that experience that's important. So it's those beliefs that anchor in a lot of experiences we've had, and so when we go to do something, we often basically on base brain, or not base brain, but on basically operating off of a core belief that we formed in childhood. And so to understand that, I say to people, like, you know, if somebody else were telling you, if somebody says to, I have to be perfect in order to be loved by others. If somebody was saying that, what kind of belief do you think they would have? Almost trying to sometimes depersonalize it, ask them to think about somebody else. But of course, they're thinking about themselves. And that's what I hope they will be. And so then they come up with a core belief that I'm worthless, or there's something wrong with me if I can't do things perfectly, whatever the belief might be. And it's often around that idea of I have to perform at a level that everyone else says is perfect in order for them to accept me. And so we try to find out where that belief came from. where that might have anchored, where it might have started early on in their life. What kind of experiences did they have, learning experiences, where they ended up believing that they had to be perfect in order to be loved by their parents or by their teachers or whoever. And then we try to unravel that and say, okay, well, this belief uh, doesn't seem to be working in your current life, in your adult life, and let's see if it's, and we look at, how that belief is negatively affecting what they're doing in their life. And so we basically begin to look at how the belief is connected to what isn't working. Then we talk about, okay, if you needed a belief that would help support what you want to have working in your life, what would that sound like? What would you believe in? What would the belief sound like? And so I get people to form a new belief that is much more functional and much more effective in helping them do what they want to do in their life. And then I have a process of helping them, uh, first of all, understand that, but also begin to process psychologically any kind of resistance they have to changing that. And the resistance is often strong. So I have them take a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle, and on the left side, write down the old belief, the old, maybe it's more the core belief that they have. And then on the right side, to take that and flip it and write the opposite of what that would be. In other words, a new belief that's very positive, that would something like, well, I can be myself and people will love me as a result. I can be authentic and people will love me, whatever it might be. And then we talk about, okay, let's process that and see what happens. So if you write that down on the right side, then you're going to get thoughts about negating thoughts that are going to say, oh, well, that's not true, or uh, I can't do that, or whatever thoughts come up. Then you write them on the left side again, and then you change those into positive thoughts on the right side, and write those. What's the opposite, the positive opposite of the negative thought? And that'll bring up some more negative thoughts, and you keep going back and forth processing this belief in terms of what kind of negative uh, thoughts and other maybe related beliefs are holding this belief in place. And eventually they come to one, if they do it effectively, they come to understand the belief that is going to carry the day, the new belief. Because when they write that down, no negative noise comes up for them anymore. They don't have any more negative negating thoughts, let's call them. And so they know that this is something that has much more power than any of the negative thoughts that they've had. So then I talk about how to help integrate that into their life. Write it down, make posters, make pictures, uh, do a, a whole collage, if you wish, about what this dream would look like or what this belief would look like if it were in action. And do anything you can to begin to operationalize it and integrate it into your life. And repeat it every day for 30 days, for example. That's one of the other things I recommend. And eventually people see that the new belief starts to take over and the old belief fades into the background and disappears. So that's how I work with beliefs, and that's how the book shows you how to work with beliefs. So there's a chapter on taming your shame, and there's another one on how to work with beliefs. So there's two chapters in there that focus specifically on beliefs and how to understand them, how to identify them, and